Good evening, everyone, particularly everyone here in our live audience, as well as those who are connected to us via live stream. Welcome to Baltimore Center Stage. My name is Robin Murphy. I serve as the Strategic Partnerships and Communications Consultant here at Baltimore Center Stage, and it's been my pleasure to actually coordinate and work with the Baltimore Banner to present tonight's forum and the Washington Blade, yes, to coordinate tonight's forum. We are all about community conversations here at Baltimore Center Stage and connecting with partners who are like-minded in that endeavor. That's our thing. It's not just the art on stage, but it's the art in the community. So welcome. I'd like to take a quick moment and introduce to you Baltimore Center Stage's Director of Artistic Partnerships and Innovation, Annalisa Diaz.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'll be very brief because I want to get to the important conversation that we have tonight. As Robin said, my name is Annalisa Diaz. I'm the Director of Artistic Partnerships and Innovation here at BCS, and I can think of no better event to partner with the Washington Blade and the Baltimore Banner on. Robin mentioned that what we're trying to do here at Baltimore Center Stage is use our building and use our art to catalyze important conversations in our community. So this event is doing that in such a special way. I want to take one quick moment to give a brief land acknowledgement on behalf of BCS. So here at BCS, we are standing on the ancestral and occupied lands of the Piscataway and Susquehannock peoples. The Lumbee people and the Lenape people have also cared for this land here and the water that is life-giving to all of us. So we take a moment now at the beginning of our events to just honor their elders, past, present, and future. And with no further, I'm going to turn it right over to John, who's going to moderate our event tonight.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Center Stage, for having us. My name is John Williams. I am the DEI reporter for Baltimore Banner and a longtime Baltimore reporter. I worked for another publication. We will not say their name. So Kevin and I were talking maybe about a month or two ago. And we came up with a great idea to have a panel discussion looking at the state of the LGBTQ community. There were a bunch of issues that were going on. This is right around a little after Pride that we wanted to discuss and talk about and bring a panel together to discuss. So that's what we have done tonight. So this is definitely in line with what the banner's priorities are, and that's definitely to reach out to the community and definitely look at inclusion and a lot of the great impactful work and stories that we do. So this is just an extension of that, and this will be part of a reoccurring series of different talks and panels and community outreach efforts that we will be doing. So let me introduce Kevin. Have Kevin introduce himself, and we will get started.
All right, thanks. Hi, I'm Kevin Knapp. I am the editor and one of the owners of the Washington Blade. And while we are based in Washington, I actually live in Baltimore and have for a long time. I came here from New York in 1996 to launch the website for that other publication whose name we're not mentioning. So I've been around a long time. But edit the Washington Blade. I just want to thank Center Stage and the Banner and John for putting all this together with us. I've seen a lot of media outlets come and go over the years, and the news and the media landscape's been pretty depressing lately. So to have this incredibly robust news operation pop up in our city is such an incredible development and a blessing for the city. So we are really fortunate to have them. So really excited to collaborate and see what else we can do together. So thanks for coming, thanks for watching, and keep reading the Banner and the Blade.
Okay, so I'd like all of our panelists to introduce themselves, and I guess the commonality between all panelists is I've interviewed all of you all and included you all in stories in the first couple of months that we have been, that since we've launched. So it will all make sense with the topics that we talk about today. So Kelly, let's start with you and work our way over.
It's working? Okay. I think so. I'm Kelly Cross. Been a resident of Baltimore for about 10 years now. My husband and I live in Old Goucher, which is in the center of Baltimore City. I'm president of the Old Goucher Community Association. We've been working on a lot of development and really neighborhood development there, intended to be very inclusive and trying to forge a new path on neighborhood development. So I'm excited to be here tonight and to talk and answer questions.
Hey everybody, my name is Derek Chavis. I have been a Baltimore County resident my whole life, but for the last decade plus one, have also lived in Baltimore City, a couple blocks away in Mount Vernon. I am a teacher. I teach history in Waverly, so 6th and 7th grade, little humans, and yeah, I'm excited to be a part of this as well. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lee Carpenter, and I want to thank John and Kevin. I don't know if you both invited me or just John, but whoever invited me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am an estates and trust attorney, and about half of my clients are members of the LGBTQ community. So I'm from Maryland. I grew up in Montgomery County, but I've been in Baltimore for about 20 years. And my husband and I live in the city. We have a 6-year-old who's going to school in the city. So I'm very, very dedicated to Baltimore, and I think it's an amazing place that could be even more amazing. And so I'm happy to help make that happen in whatever way I can. I also teach at the University of Maryland School of Law, where I attended. I teach estates and trusts as an adjunct professor there.
Great. So we're going to treat this as like a conversation between friends. We do have one more panelist who will be joining us, but we will talk about certain topics that are very pertinent and that are definitely front of mind right now in our community. And yeah, that will be fairly, just let it flow, so to speak. So kind of relax, take a breath or whatever, and we're not gonna bite or scream or any of that.
Do we seem tense? Because I'm fine.
Yeah. So I think we should start, let's start with Clarence Thomas. And let's start with Roe versus Wade and his where do we begin there? So Roe versus Wade obviously was it got a lot of the headlines and basically attracted a lot of the attention, rightfully so, with women's reproductive issues being reversed. But there was a little bit of a caveat there that some of us paid attention to. And it was Thomas's concurring opinion that essentially people thought that it promised to overturn certain issues like same-sex marriage equality and other issues that would definitely affect the LGBTQ community. Shortly after people started learning about that concurring opinion, what was business like for you, Lee? Were you getting contacted? And yeah.
Business picked up considerably that day. The phone began ringing that day. And I've been hearing from people who are new clients saying, we've been together for a long time. We really need to have a look at this and get advice on whether we should get married. So I advise a lot of people on whether they should get married. And I've actually persuaded plenty of couples that they should. And I've performed some of the weddings in some cases, which I don't charge for. So we'll do a prenuptial agreement. We do the wedding, that's free. And then we do the estate plan. And it's a complete package. But a lot of people have been wondering whether their marriage is in jeopardy because what Clarence Thomas said. So, you know, the advice I've been giving people is that if you think marriage is right for you, then by all means get married while you can. Having an estate plan is important too, because if for some reason marriage should fail, and I think there's reason to be optimistic. I could talk about this all day, so I'll try to keep this brief, but I think there's reason to be optimistic about the future of same-sex marriage. But if for some reason it should fail, it's important to have a power of attorney so that if you become incapacitated, your then partner can make financial decisions for you. It's important to have an advance directive so that you can make medical decisions for each other. You have that right if you're a married couple, but you don't if you're just partners. So it's important to have that document that names someone. It's also important to have a will that says that your partner will inherit your estate and can settle your estate. So putting those kinds of documents in place is a safeguard against what the future of same-sex marriage might be. But at the same time, I do think there's reason to be optimistic. I was just talking to Kevin about how there's a bill that was a success in the House to legalize same-sex marriage nationwide. That needs to go to the Senate, where there are a few votes shy, but it could still happen. I don't think that policymakers really want to open the can of worms that we'd be seeing if suddenly we have to go back to the patchwork of laws we had state by state, where some states in some states same-sex marriage is legal, in some states it's not. Federal agencies will offer benefits if you were married in a state where it was legal to get married at the time, or if you're residing in a state where it's currently legal, and the agencies would differ on those rules. It would really be a nightmare to go back to that just from an administrative standpoint. And I think that we've had same-sex marriage long enough that we've seen, legislatures have gone to same-sex weddings, that people have come out as a result of the Obergefell decision. And so I think we've won hearts and minds just because of that. So I'm hopeful about what the future holds, but by all means, put things in place as a hedge against what might happen. Hello.
I am less hopeful. I'll take a slightly different take on it quickly. So the bill that has passed the House, it passed with 47 Republican votes, which was nice, but that means there were 150 Republicans who voted against it. In the Senate right now, we need obviously the 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. Tammy Baldwin's in charge of whipping the vote. She says she's got all 50 Democrats. 5 Republicans have publicly committed to voting for it. And Tammy has told us and Politico that she thinks she has 5 more. So the bill could pass. The problem with the bill is that the feds don't govern marriage, states do. So what it would do is if Obergefell were to be overturned, about I think 26 states already have laws on the books banning same-sex marriage. So immediately those states would not be able to marry same-sex couples anymore. But this bill would force states to recognize marriages performed in blue states. So it will create a patchwork of laws and a big mess, and it does it opens up all sorts of questions about crossing state lines and so forth, which speaks to the need for having directives and all of that. But this is all happening because we now have a 6-3 right-wing activist court. They've undone Roe. That was always priority number 1, and marriage is number 2. Alito and Thomas have both publicly said that they want to revisit Obergefell. And we should not be under any illusion that there aren't 5 votes to overturn it, because absolutely there are. So we haven't seen those cases filed yet, but they are in the planning stages. They are going to be filing cases in conservative district courts, and those cases will start percolating. It'll take a few years probably, but it's coming. So this is what happens when people don't vote.
And Lee, really quickly, Maryland has marriage equality. So if people here are married, like some of our panelists are right now, what does this impact mean if marriage equality is overturned from a national perspective?
Sure. So if we did have a case that made its way through the Supreme Court, Obergefell was overturned, we would still have same-sex marriage in Maryland. Maryland passed a law, and it passed a voter referendum. And so until that law changes, we would still have same-sex marriage in Maryland. Now, whether the federal benefits that go along with same-sex marriage disappear or not is an open question. So there are a lot of federal benefits that apply to married couples. That would include things like Social Security. When one spouse dies, the surviving spouse can take the amount that the deceased spouse was collecting. There are benefits for veterans and people in the military, and on down the line. There are also, I mean, when it comes to bankruptcy, for example, there are, marriage matters in a lot of ways. So although you could still be married in Maryland, whether you would receive federal benefits because of your marriage in Maryland is an open question. It would depend on, what the federal government does and it's hard to say, what the future would hold.
What would happen if a couple goes to a red state? A married, same-sex married couple goes to a red state and, God forbid, someone has to go to the hospital and is like in a coma or something.
Right.
Is their marriage going to be recognized there if that state does not recognize marriage equality? And, they're married in Maryland, but we're in like Arkansas or Alabama or something like that. What rights do you have at that point?
You wouldn't have much in the way of rights. And that's why it's important to have an advance directive, a power of attorney, and a will. And I mean, I recommend that couples now have these documents with them when they travel, because if you wind up in the deep, deep South and you've got an uncooperative, physician's assistant, it can be helpful just to point out that not only are we married, but we have documents to back up the fact that we've given each other these powers. So all bets are off. So another reason to stay in Baltimore, be committed to the city, and make it a great place to live.
To chime in and say on this point, my my own husband is a Polish citizen, and we moved here to Baltimore pretty much directly from Europe. And even though we got married under Maryland laws when marriage was legalized here in the state, the Defense of Marriage Act was still in place at the federal level when we got married here in Maryland. And a number of immigration benefits, those are federal benefits. So if you, in our case, for instance, if Obergefell is overturned, or if there starts to be an attack on federal recognition of same-sex marriages, our ability to stay in this country as a couple is under threat. So for us, we weren't going into an estate's attorney, but we did start his citizenship application because it's a real concern.
Status is another factor that's affected. Absolutely.
Derek, now when Thomas's concurring opinion came out, you were actually on a cruise in Alaska, weren't you, with your husband? What was going through your mind when you were out there and trying to enjoy a vacation, and then the realities of this came about?
So I would like to start this by saying real quick, we're talking about the deep, deep South, but we are coming up on a gubernatorial election where a very, very dangerous right-wing person could possibly become our governor. So before I get into John's question, I just tell your friends because it's a cancer and it's leaking all over the place, right? So I want to just throw that out there. To John's question, yes. So really quick backstory. I grew up Pentecostal holiness. My father was a music pastor my entire life. My father, yes. So, I mean, Pentecostal to the point where I went to the Pentecostal Holiness College and was expelled when I was outed, right? So, like, that's my story. My dad is very conservative. He did vote, in 2016 for that guy. I will say in 2020, he did not. So my father is kind of learning along with his family, but it's still very hard to talk about what's going on in the world with him without him getting very defensive. So this was a family trip. My husband, who's right over there, my sister and her husband, my parents, we flew to Seattle. The morning we woke up, that we were about to get on the boat is like, I woke up, I went to Walgreens for something, and I'm looking at my phone and I just stopped dead in my tracks. And I sent the link to my husband, Patrick, and I said, this is going to be a very interesting trip. My sister is an LCSW. She is very, 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 very liberal, and she's a dog with a bone about anything. And so I just was thinking, the six of us are about to get on a ship to the most remote state in the country. And I don't know how this is going to go. But for me, I just kept thinking, how did we get here? How did we get here? I kept thinking back to 2016. So I was in marketing for a really long time. Upon the 2016 election, I decided I can't do this anymore because I'm not doing things to make people better, right? So when that happened, I decided I wanted to become a teacher. I wanted to teach social studies. I wanted to teach people civics and voting and how important this all is, right? And I just kept thinking about that decision that I made and how my husband and I, who got married in December 2019, right before the world shut down for 2 years, who we haven't even had a honeymoon yet. And it's just, this is happening now? What's next? John texted me, and I kind of just like lost my mind a little bit because I really, in the best way possible, of course, just because this stuff is on my mind all the time, right? It's on most of our minds all the time. And I just thought, I need to get through this trip. I need to enlighten the people who I love that need to be enlightened without fights. And I know that that's probably something that all of us are thinking about right now. How do we tell the people that we love that we are going in a very, very different direction than this country was meant to be, without starting huge arguments? Because I know we're all sick of arguing. I know that we're all sick of fighting, infighting, all of it. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's just me and Patrick. That's who I have to look out for. It's us. So yeah, I mean, I started Googling things because I'm kind of manic. And what do I do when I get back from Alaska? And, we've looked into it. We have not followed through right now, but it's a long process, right? I mean, it's a thing that we are just all so busy, and we forget that this is still real life. It's still happening. And every single day, we're getting news articles pushed to our phone about the next step, what's happening now. And I just think it's all a lot, but for me and my husband, it is something that, I never thought when we hit this, just not even 10 years ago, that we would regress so quickly, right? And it's terrifying. It's very, very scary. And I don't know about you guys, but I would like to honor myself as the pop culture panelist here. And I've been watching Living Single, as I know you know.
Mhm.
And it's very interesting because this whole question started with Clarence Thomas. And Sinclair mentioned Clarence Thomas with like pride. And
Did she? I didn't see that episode.
Listen, it's season 1, episode 4. I'm just letting you know. And it was a situation where one of the characters was trying to look better, or like she had more going on for her life than with an ex-boyfriend, Max, her ex-boyfriend from law school. And Sinclair had said something about, oh, and Clarence Thomas. And I just thought to myself, how interesting it was to like hear his name in like a positive, especially on a Black TV show, right? Where
I will say that was probably very off-brand.
I don't know. It just
Somehow
feels it feels very
that
important
episode
right now.
escaped me, and I've seen all of them. I just don't remember that one, and I
I'm
don't
gonna
remember
send it to you.
Black people being like,
I'm gonna
"Ooh,
send it.
rah,
Well,
rah, Clarence Thomas."
But it was
like,
also Sinclair.
yes.
So I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts on this. It's a very scary thing. He's a very scary person. But at the end of the day, I mean, allegedly, we're in control of this, right? So we just have to do our due diligence.
Okay, London, I think this is a good time to introduce you. So I think you should introduce yourself and tell us what you do, and we will talk a little bit about this issue from your standpoint.
I apologize. I was in and I had to run out. The rain is terrible. I'm soaking wet. My hair is a poodle, but it's okay. My name is London Smith de Richelieu. I am the director of the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs. I am the first to hold this position in its new capacity where it's been codified in the city charter. And I'm the first trans woman to be on a mayoral cabinet here. And let's see, I am originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm from here. I'm a native of Baltimore. And it's so funny that you just brought up Clarence Thomas, because today I did a little pictorial from where I was from. And I went back to my elementary school, which is shut down. And it was a bittersweet moment for me. It brought some tears to my eyes. And I remembered Ben Carson, who was my hero back then. And I just brought that up and I started to talk about Ben Carson. I said, wow, how the tables have turned. So yeah, I am originally from Baltimore. My parents are from here. I went to college in Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Morehouse. I went to Hofstra Law and Gittenstein Institute for public health law. And I am currently trying to get my PhD in public health. But I had to put it on hold while this office started because this office is new. So I have to like kind of build it out. And it has been, it's a struggle in a way, not in a bad way, but in a way that I see all the divides and I want to bring everyone together. I want it to be more inclusive. I want Baltimore to be a more unified city and to start bridging the gaps between generational gaps and racial divides and bridge everyone together so that we can, make this the city that it's supposed to be.
So, yep. Dealing with the issue that we were just talking about, Thomas's concurring opinion, have you received any type of calls from the public or any concern from citizens or residents or anything of that nature? Or how has the reversal of Roe versus Wade, how does that trickle down or send ripple effects into other communities?
Well, for one, being a trans woman, I definitely, for me, around the fundamental right to privacy and having autonomy over my body, I stand in solidarity with women, and with women and men, because trans men can also be pregnant. People forget that too. Non-binary folks can also be pregnant as well, and so I stand in solidarity with those with the capacity to be pregnant. And so one of the things that we've been working on, and I just got a request, is that an organization here will be creating a mural in dedication to that, our bodies, our choices, and they just got our support from us down at City Hall. Our mayor recently, Brandon Scott, just actually signed a letter in support with the mayors of the United States supporting the Respect for Marriage Act, and that was signed off and sent off right before the vote that passed in the House, and they sent another letter out as well, urging again the Senate to go ahead and to vote for the respect. The calls that we've gotten again have been around abortion, and what you've already seen is that our mayor and our city council stand in solidarity with those with the capacity to be pregnant, and we are a safe haven city. We've allocated funding, and if you've read recently, I think it was $500,000 was allocated recently for funding to go to nonprofits that support those seeking abortion that may want to come to Baltimore.
Okay, great. Let's continue a little bit about, let's switch topics a little bit and talk about Pride Month, which is kind of marred by the fire in the Able neighborhood, and then also the flag ban in Carroll County. Now, I know that Carroll County is not Baltimore City, so that's a different can of worms, but the Able fire did happen here.
Yes.
Do you have any types of updates on that? Because Kevin and I have been talking and we just haven't really gotten much of anything.
I actually just got an update. So what I will say is this, that it's currently still under investigation. We're working with our state and federal partners to make sure that it's properly investigated. And the thing is that you can't make statements in advance while the investigation is going on, because you could mess up the investigation completely. One wrong statement, so we've been banding together with the state's attorney's office. We've all met together, state's attorney's office, the FBI is involved, as well as the ATF. There has been, calls amongst us all to make sure that we stay updated. What we've done is we've been able to go out into that community and to do outreach. Myself, as well as the LGBTQ liaison for the fire department, we personally went, I sat down, in the neighborhood, talked to some of the neighbors to see some of the things that they needed. We're able to still try to provide support, in lieu of the fact that we don't have answers as far as the investigation is concerned, but we still want to be able to provide support to the able community. And we've done that, and have extended that branch, that handout. I definitely, I just messaged the POI at the fire department before I sat down to ask about any updates, because I wanted to make sure you all got any updates, and they said that it's still under investigation.
I guess it's good to hear that all these agencies are involved and that the investigation is happening. Beyond that, what are you hearing from the neighbors there and the victims? Are they recovered? How are they feeling? What do you hear from the community?
So I went, when I recently went, the couple were out of the hospital, and I had a heart-wrenching story from a neighbor next door, brought me to tears. They were a hetero-cis couple, and the older gentleman in the house became like his best friend. And so they put a table and chairs in front of their house. And so I sat there, and sitting there, I actually ended up meeting another neighbor who was affected. And they just, they explained to me, like, we provided them with resources, and of course they were going through their own insurance and dealing with those things. And the one thing that's been the strong point is that the community has been a big part of healing for them. The community has raised money. The community has been there to support them. The community has been able to provide them with housing, afterwards. So, this has been a great example of community kind of coming together. And like you all, I want to get answers too. I'm a part of this community, so I want to find out. And so I'm definitely on it, and I will continue to ask and ask and ask. But again, that's all that I can do is, allow the agencies to do their job and to answer back to us. Because, so specifically, like that these things, I don't want to, I gotta be careful with the things that I say. Like I said, so what I'll do is I'll just continue to ask, and I will continue to update you all with the language that, I'm given from the agencies.
One thing, how safe do you think that the LGBTQ community is here in Baltimore right now?
Wow. Well, as a Black trans woman, let me just tell you something. Okay. I have been working, and I'm glad that we've created we have a liaison at the police department, because a lot of things happen, but it's been a lot of fear for people to go and tell things that happen. So I could just give an incident with myself. I was walking with a friend of mine, and we were walking down the street. Now, my friend is, I have passing privilege, right? So walking together, we're all just out. But it doesn't matter. It was myself, a cis woman, and them. And the guy decided to brandish a gun and say, I don't want that FS around here, right? So I'm like, did he just really just show a gun and say that he didn't want, people in this neighborhood, right? So, that put some fear. I mean, that same individual, maybe like a couple of weeks later, they were robbed at gunpoint, right? They were robbed. Person robbed them. And the police responded, and they were on it that's one thing I can say is that, I was able to reach out to the liaison, reach out to the police, and, be kind of a buffer, because a lot of people in the community are afraid to go to the police because they're afraid that, it's like you're calling as the victim and you end up becoming the criminal when you're calling in. It's like, did I do it or did he do it? And one thing that the police department here is doing, especially under the consent decree, there are specific rules of engagement dealing with LGBTQ community. I watched them talk to the individual. They instantly ask, what is your preferred name? What are your pronouns? They went through the full process with them. I was there, so they didn't know my position. I just was there, as a witness to what was going on. I didn't tell them I worked with this. I didn't tell them who I was or what I do, and they did it on their own. I was happy to see that. So having our liaison at the police department is one of the ways that we kind of keep data, or because it's a lot of people. A lot of things aren't reported, or hate crimes aren't reported, and so I've been intentional with dealing with our liaison to make sure that, hey, when you hear about something, or to tell me about it so I can keep record, and to actually take your own diligence and look at some of the things that are going on and see the demographic of the things that are happening to people. And she has done so. She's been able to do so. And so we've been keeping, track. But one of the things, when we talk about violence, I would be remiss about mentioning, not just physical violence, right? Not just talking about intimate partner violence, we're talking about drug addiction and the violence that goes along with that, right? The violence, the suicide, right? And people here being impacted by drugs. A large portion of LGBTQ community are impacted by drugs here in Baltimore, whether it's the opioid, whether it's crystal methamphetamine. These are things that I witnessed, I watched for myself, and people having access to proper detox places, where they go there and they're in detox, and all of a sudden somebody will say, take your wig off. A young lady called me the other day, and I was trying to get her into treatment, and she's like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. She's like, because when I go there, they tell me to take my hair off, and that I have to tell them their dead name. And I'm like, so again, those are things. My office isn't a service-based office, so it's for me to, I have to go out and kind of link with some of the nonprofits and work through them and work through some of these agencies and come with our stance and our policies here in the city, and how, and explain to them, our non-discrimination policies in the cities, and work with them. But unfortunately, a lot of those treatments places are church-run. And so that becomes a difficulty. And so it's about us creating an arm out to some of these faith-based organizations and building a bond with them, and letting them know like our priorities and what's actually happening on the ground, and that they're denying access, and you claim that you're about all well-being, and you want mankind to be well, and you want to heal people, but how can you exclude a certain group of people that really wants to get well? So I would be remiss without mentioning that I've actually watched myself. I've actually had to provide Narcan to 2 trans women. Like I just I was at a gas station just getting gas, and so happened that somebody said, hey, does anybody have Narcan? Thank God I did. It was in my glove box. And I went over, and when I looked down, I actually knew the person from working in community. So, I'm like freaking out a little bit, because I'm like, oh my God, I know them. But I was able to provide them the Narcan. They jumped up, they helped me. They just held me so tight. And I just, that put a wave over me. And this is right before I got the position here. So that was one of the things that kind of gave me the passion to want to be in this position. And so that's one of the things I'm passionate about, is making sure that we get people into care, particularly when it comes to opioid addiction and addiction period, and mental health.
Yes. Yeah. I want to, just to your point about your question about is it safe for the LGBTQ community in Baltimore? And I would say, I still to this day, my husband and I have lived on our block in Old Goucher for 10 years now, and I still to this day do not feel comfortable holding his hand, walking down the sidewalk. I still do not feel comfortable being, displaying affection openly in Baltimore. I can't tell you the number of times we have had encounters or people who even have lived around us for a while, and there's some sort of issue in the neighborhood. I'm president of the neighborhood association, so maybe we're planting trees and folks don't like that, or putting some plants somewhere, and then folks will immediately go to faggot. It's like the first insult, and it's very prevalent in Baltimore. I would say also, I think especially regarding the trans community and trans women of color, because we have many in Old Goucher, and I have seen, I'm sure my stats are off, but I believe I know of at least 6 Black trans women who have been murdered in Baltimore in the time that we've lived here, and a few who were in our neighborhood. One thing I'm glad that there's this new cabinet level position, but one thing I have been incredibly disappointed about my time in Baltimore politically has been that our city has great legislation, our state has very good legislation, but the actual practice and implementation of protecting the LGBTQ community, in particular with giving them or giving us space to just simply exist, is not there. And I'll give an example. There was a city-owned lot on Charles Street, the 2000 block of Charles Street, and the Pride Center of Maryland is headquartered in our neighborhood. And so I had worked very hard a few years ago to get a bond bill, state money. I think it was around $750,000 that we got from the state for the Pride Center to build a new, to build a new facility. And so I found a great developer, a Black development group that had real expertise with this out of Washington. We had the Pride Center. It was a development where we're going to have retail on the ground floor that the Pride Center would actually get to own and generate revenue for itself. The Pride Center would be on 2 floors. Above that, another floor for LGBTQ services, and then apartments on the top floors. So real mixed-use development, something that was going to allow the Pride Center to have a permanent place in Baltimore and in Maryland. Well, the only thing we needed was this city-owned land to put it on. And we went through this whole RFP process. We all thought, wow, this is a great proposal. This is perfect for the community. One of the neighborhood associations that's to the south of us, they came to this presentation, and the city set up this whole mechanism where it was their input that mattered. And they came, and after the meeting told me very directly that they didn't like this proposal because we already had, as they described it, too much of a problem with trans prostitutes in the neighborhoods. How they described it, trans prostitutes, and then said that we didn't need any more of these services around, even though this was going to be a real benefit to the whole community. So the lot was ultimately awarded to what I would call effectively a slumlord developer. That land, he was never able to develop it. It's been sitting empty now, the 2000 block of Charles Street. So it's been sitting empty now for several years. So to me, seeing them, and Pride had moved up into Old Goucher shortly thereafter. So it was really shocking for me to see all the politicians from the city showing up to celebrate Pride in the neighborhood, want to get on the stage. I think the bathroom bill, bathroom equality bill had passed that year here in City Council. So everyone's so proud about that. But this ability that the city had to simply provide land so that something could be built and there could be permanence for the community was overlooked.
And can I just piggyback off of that? And that was one of the things that I was against. I didn't want my office to be performatory. Like I did not want to be in a role that's just performatory. Like, let me just give you something and like, you take this. No. That's not what's going to happen with me in this role. And the purpose of this office and it's supposed to be, it's a funded office. It is an office that is able to do things and to make a difference. And it's good to hear you say these things because I need to be able to take them back and to be able to deal with the powers that be to make sure that things are done and that you do see a difference. Before, they've tried to, there was a trans violence citation or something. They were trying to recognize trans life. What does that really do? It's like, okay, you stand up in front of city council and say trans lives are getting killed. Okay, but what is the performance? Like, what are you going to do? What proactive things are you going to do to make sure that you're saving trans lives? And so one of my things is dealing with the social determinants of health, right? Let's deal with that. There's poverty, there's employment, there's violence. Let's chip away at all those social determinants to really create well-being. And so one of the things that I'm glad that you mentioned, and I would love to, extend out an offer. What I'm trying to do is create a work group. So right now, our LGBTQ commission is accepting applications, and I just made them live on our page for community to apply, and then you'll be appointed by the mayor, and then you get confirmed. It's a whole process. But in besides that, I want to create a work group with LGBTQ leaders to kind of help direct some of the work that we do and to hold us accountable for what we do in the office. And that's with that's in addition to the commission, right? So the commission is there to help the work of the office, but I want the work group to hold the office accountable.
I think that's incredibly important. And I also think that, when I talk about creating spaces for the queer community in Baltimore, it's one issue I see in the city is a real, it's a problem in Baltimore, not just in the queer community or regarding the queer community, but it's this notion of respectability politics. So it's like, well, we're okay, we're gonna hang the rainbow flag and say, love is love, and hang all of our banners as long as it's gayness and queerness like confined in this very neat, predictable, safe box. So if you're coming up, and I think we miss often a lot of the intersectionality in Baltimore, but if you're coming up as a particularly as a white gay married couple, for instance, there's often a lot of there's often more acceptance with that. There's often this thought that, well, they're going to raise our property values. And I've heard people say this to me, like, oh, we're happy about that. We like that. But then when you start getting into, this was something we've seen in Old Goucher, once you start getting to Black, queer people of color, trans women of color, then suddenly the shift, there's a shift. Well, we don't really want that here. We really prefer this here. And so then it becomes, the same, and I've seen this, some of the same people putting the big, pride flags in their windows will be the same people 2 weeks later who will call, me or call the president of their neighborhood association saying, can you protest this? You make sure the police are out making sure these folks aren't walking around.
You know what? One of the first stories I wrote for the banner was called it The Broken Rainbow. The divide, the racial and gender divide within the LGBTQ community. And got a lot of good feedback, and people talked a lot about it, but I think that's an interesting segue to talk about how do we bridge that divide? This city, the LGBTQ community is no different from any other demographic. There are major divides. We are not this kumbaya family, and we're not all, baking cookies together. And we are fairly fragmented along all lines. And I do want to talk a little bit about how we can kind of bridge those gaps and where our soft spots are so that these issues can be addressed. Let's start talking with the social aspect, and you can go to a club or a bar, and people are fairly segregated. Yeah.
Well, let's just say all the Black clubs are gone, right? Like all the Black clubs don't exist anymore. The Buns, Paradox, the Gallery, all of the Black clubs have been, in these gentrified areas have been pushed out, and they don't, and for a lot of queer community, particularly Black and brown community, unfortunately, Black and brown community doesn't have the privilege to have a neighborhood, right? Like we exist within the communities that we exist in. If you live in the projects, you're just gay in the projects. Like that's just what it is. And so in a lot of these spaces, these neighborhoods, there is a lot of discrimination that goes on in those spaces. And I've watched it happen myself as a Black trans woman where, some of the bars over in Mount Vernon would not want certain people to come into the bars. The same thing that you said, like around the community, not wanting the prostitutes there, but the prostitutes are what made the neighborhood so chic and cool, right? That's what made it so, like where people wanted to move into it because it was so like grimy that, the lofty look, just like New York in the meatpacking district. You wanted to move there because that's where the prostitutes were and that's where the action was going on. And then once you get in there and you move in, all of a sudden, oh, they're bringing down the value. But those are the same things that attracted you to the neighborhood. So why are you trying to push those entities out of the neighborhood? University of Maryland took over the spot where Buns was. Then you have Hippo taking over why CVS is now the Hippo. Then you have up by the gallery, them not having enough money after COVID to stay open. So a lot of Black young queer community have no place to go anymore. For a lot of us, and I'm actually in the house ballroom scene. I'm a mother of the House of Miyake Mugler. And, you know, for a lot of us, that's how we found community. We found ourselves in those clubs. Like that's how I was able to like come out. And besides my family loving me and accepting me, like they founded me and loved me in those spaces. My gay fathers, you know, in community, we say gay mom, gay dad, gay parents. Well, when I was in college at Morehouse, my gay dad, you know, when the club was over with, he popped the trunk and he purchased every book I needed from the entire semester at Morehouse. Like he purchased all my books. I didn't have to do anything. He's like, here's open the trunk, continue to get good grades, right? And that's how I found family, in those clubs. We don't have those clubs anymore. So that's one of the things. So when you do go to the clubs that do exist, a lot of those clubs are white clubs, and you know, there's this thing of like, and they're white gay men, and there's like this feeling of uncomfortability because of past incidences in history that have happened in the city, where people in these neighborhoods like St. Paul will push a lot of the Black trans women or the Black men out of the area. If you go to the Eagle, right? So the Eagle now exists, and everyone's just in one space, right? We're all just trying to party in one space. I go there now. I like to just go. I like to enjoy people. I don't care what you are. I don't care what your color, your age. I love older people. I love younger people. I can learn something from everybody, right? So I don't really discriminate where I go. And I wish other people would feel that way too. But it just doesn't. So we got to learn to have these hard conversations, because sometimes the conversations are really hard, and we got to hold people to the fire and say, look, this is what's going on. I think that's like one of the things holding people up to the fire. The people that are gentrifying and pushing the people out, the powers that be that are closing these clubs and establishments, and the people that are not providing, you know, access to be able to recreate these spaces, which are some of the funders. You know, this discrimination that exists for people that are trying to get loans to open up these clubs. They're not providing that.
And let me say, I'm glad you mentioned, it's funny you mentioned the Club Buns situation and the Eagle, because I'm actually trying to help right now the owner of Club Buns, Dana Owens, to find a new space. And I'll
Breaking news.
and you know, and and also with the Eagle. So that's the first time that I really got to experience this notion of respectability politics in Baltimore, because the Eagle was trying to move up, and there were a lot of neighbors. And it was interesting because there were a lot of gay men who lived around the Eagle who were very upset that it was that was being reopened, particularly when a lot of the trans women started coming to the bar. And I would get calls from, you know, a lot of gay men. And I was always shocked also at the types of slurs I would hear coming from gay men about trans women, the ways they would describe them. And I would say with the Club Bun situation, this is a case where it's a Black queer space, historic, long-standing, doesn't fit in that mold of respectability politics for Baltimore. And so the University of Maryland decided they want to, you know, change their neighborhood, upgrade it, and as opposed to seeing Club Buns as an amenity in a space that could really anchor a very inclusive, interesting community, I showed up for their liquor license hearing, the University of Maryland, and yeah, they're sitting here trying to close down their, you know, revoke their liquor license based on some really spurious claims that there was drug use. There was no police documentation of this, just folks saying, oh, well, I saw this and I saw that. I thought to myself, why aren't you working to try to, you know, bring up this venue and integrate it?
They said they were they said there were bottles, alcohol bottles in the daycare, the nursery area that was next door. Not to mention that, you know, we all know how Lexington Market is, right? People walk around with liquor bottles in Lexington Market. Who's to say that the people that were down there weren't the ones to do it? Why did it have to be those at the gay club, right?
And I would just like to say, I don't have the insider information, so I'm sorry that I'm not as interesting here. But just as a Mount Vernon resident for the last decade, I think it's important to talk about the fact that Mount Vernon isn't gay anymore, right? It's not why it is not the neighborhood that I wanted to move to. And it's frustrating because there is such a dynamic queer culture here. And one of my hopes is that now that, you know, some of these like club owners with antiquated views are no longer with this area, we can maybe turn that space.
What do you mean by that?
Girl, do you really want me to go there? Do you,
I mean, you know,
so I
don't
mean,
talk about it, be about it.
I mean, so I know, for instance, one of my best friends from high school was a DJ in this area, right? And she used to DJ at a very prominent gay club located at 1000 North Charles Street, that she was not allowed to play Black music before midnight, right? So she was literally not allowed to do it. She had to play top 40. She wasn't allowed to, and so she left and she DJ'd in DC for a long time, and until Nelly's is also kind of the same. So she's out of that now, but I got the insider information on like what she was supposed to do at that specific club. Meanwhile, the owner was going on Facebook rants about people of color. So it's a very frustrating thing where, you know, I just want to go have a good time, and it becomes problematic because I'm supporting somebody who has terrible views of the world. So again, now that those people are not here, I look forward to hopefully gaying up Mount Vernon again, but in a more inclusive area. Like, you know, I mean, we have a CVS and an office building now, right? So those two places are gone. We're done. And honestly, the restaurant that was down the street, they were problematic too. So we got out a lot of people who probably just, you know, they were cool in the 90s, and that's not where we are anymore. And so I look forward, hopefully, to bringing back a little bit of rainbow to Mount Vernon, because the last 2 years have been awful. I mean, I don't know. Listen, we go to bed at 9 o'clock now, and I live downtown. So I don't know what this is, but I'm not interested in it. And so if y'all have money and you want to open up something, like, you know, there's people up, not me, but there's people up here that you can talk to that we can make this happen.
Two quick points. One, I think there is a generational component to some of this, because when I don't get out to nightclubs as much as I used to in the 90s, but I have been to the Eagle on a Saturday night, late at night, and it's bustling. It's full of young people from all different backgrounds, and a lot of non-binary and trans folks are in there, and it's a really interesting, huge space that seems to bring a lot of people together. So I hope some of this is generational and is getting better. On the safety issue, I will just say that I really hope we get to the bottom of what happened in Able. There was a very similar crime that happened in DC right after that, where a pride flag was set on fire and it ignited the garage and damaged the house. We just had an attack last week in DC. A gay couple that was walking down the street was attacked and beaten and called monkeypox faggots. You know, crime is real in cities, in all cities. And let's just remember that when Donald Trump became president, all of the hate crimes, not just for LGBT, but across the board, increased by double digits for each year of his presidency. So it speaks to the power of the bully pulpit. And when the president speaks, people listen and they act. And so I'd like to leave the crime thing on that note.
And on that note, I think we need a drink. I'm not joking. We do. So we do have a little bit of an intermission, about 10 minutes. So if you'd like to stimulate the economy at that bar back there, that would be great. And we will be back with a number of topics, including monkeypox and other bright moments. So thanks so much for joining us right now, and we will be back in about 10 minutes. All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. We're going to, oh, Lord.
I know. I'm going to get Jason some dinner. I'm going to be at the Prime Rib. Call me.
Okay.
Anytime.
Okay. We're going to be starting right now. Okay, welcome back. I hope everyone is, I guess so. So I think this is a good point, good transition to circle back to talking about health and wellness. There was, we were talking about substance abuse and things of that nature, and it reminded me of a story that I wrote for another publication, and about the gay poor, P-O-U-R, and the tradition, or the tradition of gay bars to pour heavier amounts of alcohol for drinks. And I looked at the I guess the reason behind that, and it's because of years of mistrust by the LGBTQ community with the medical field. For those of you who didn't know and might be too young to know this, there was a time when being gay or lesbian or trans or bi was just considered a mental illness. And as a result, many people from the community did not go to seek medical help, or they just had really horrible interactions with that community. So they essentially found their own ways of coping and medicating. So they would go to bars, and their bartender would essentially be their therapist. And the drug of choice would be alcohol. So bartenders would pour heavier amounts of alcohol as a way of like soothing you from like taking the edge off of like weeks, like your regular your realities, the aggressions that you would have to deal with and discrimination you'd have to deal with. So I'd like to know, anecdotally probably, because there probably isn't much data on that, how you are seeing how the LGBTQ community basically has dealt with COVID and all of the pressures that we've had to deal with there. Are we seeing like an increase in substance abuse problems from that in the past 2 years or so?
So I can start this off just quickly. To the point of the heavy pour, I will say my straight friends loved coming to the gay bars. They loved it. They loved it. Even my cis straight guy friends who were just like fratty bros, they were like, "Oh my God, I love that place because they get me effed up." And I'm just like, "Yeah, like, let's see." So now that I'm older, I understand more behind it. However, I know that I've also I bartend. I still bartend sometimes. I'm a teacher again, so side hustle is like, love that. And when I work weddings, people will be like, "Oh my God, like this is so strong. It's amazing." And I'm just, oh, that's how I'm an elder millennial is what we're called. And
Wait, you're an elder millennial.
that's what, I don't know, somebody said it.
Was that make me like Frederick Douglass? I mean, my
Yeah.
God.
I don't know. This is what. So I was born in 1985. People who were born in the 80s.
Say
who
no
are-
more.
Anyway, I'm just saying this is how this is just how I know how to bartend, right? And it's something that like I still understand is a thing. Now, in regards to COVID, again, millennials, I think regardless of how you identify, we became luscious. I think a lot of people around my age. I mean, my husband and I could have stock in Botobox and like be good forever, like just on us. And that became kind of increasingly clear to us. Like in the beginning, it was all fun and games. We're like, oh, like this is cool. Like we get a lot more time together. Again, we had only been married for 3 months, guys. So we got married and then the world shut down 3 months later. Like our first year of marriage was in our 1-bedroom apartment. So it was a lot of Botobox and a lot of therapizing each other, right? Like we're kind of figuring out who the other is as a husband. We'd lived together for a couple of years, but you know, marriage always changes things. For whatever reason, marriage changes things. It's a piece of paper, it's a ring, but it's so much more than that. And I know for us, we became a lot more thirsty. And fast forward, shirts didn't button the same way anymore. We were like really enjoying the situation. We have now realized that that is a situation, and us together, because we have each other, we're lucky enough, right, to have each other in this world, which not everybody can say. We've realized that it's a thing, and we're trying to do better. I have noticed friends they've continued because not everybody has somebody, and not everybody has somebody who's going to be constructive with them. And so to the best of my ability, I just let them live their lives, and hope that we get to a space where the world opens back up even more. Yes, we're cautious, but we do a lot less of this alone in our homes, because that, I think, is the really scary part about what has happened.
Lee.
I can say with my clients, obviously things are better since coming out of COVID, but during COVID, I was meeting a lot of people on their front porches, in their backyards. People were driving up in their car to sign their documents, and there was a sense of real urgency and panic in some cases. And I remember talking to one client, and I'm going to choke up just telling the story, but he hadn't touched another human being for I forget how many months when he and I spoke on the phone, and he couldn't stop talking. He just couldn't stop talking. And so, I tried to just engage him and ask how things were going and what was on his mind and whatnot. There were a couple of suicides I had of clients during COVID. One guy was just in his 20s. It was really tragic. Things are much better since then, but it was difficult for everybody to cope during that time. And I think LGBTQ people, especially those who are alone, were really especially affected by it. So.
And Kevin, what are you seeing in DC, and what are you hearing?
Yeah, in terms of COVID, the two communities that we covered pretty closely that were disproportionately impacted by COVID were sex workers who suddenly lost their livelihood, and they couldn't exactly get PPP money. So it was really hard on that community. And also young people, particularly from conservative families or backgrounds who had gone away to college and were finally able to be out and be themselves, and then that was snatched away and they were sent back to hostile homes. There was a lot of, stories around, suicide so those two communities we covered pretty closely were really affected by COVID.
I will say that I feel like Kathy Lee and Hoda right now with this drink. I'm like, it is pretty full. It won't be full for much longer. Let's talk about monkeypox. Yeah, another shining, bright moment. If COVID wasn't enough, now we have monkeypox to worry about. Lord Jesus. London, can we talk a little bit about, resources and access to vaccines and all that good stuff? Because I want to know where you can get a vaccine, and Yeah, that
Yeah,
would be great.
I've had one and it hurts a lot. Like it hurts.
I'll deal with the
It
hurt.
hurts. Yeah. No. And I listen. It
I don't want
hurts.
to deal with the
Listen,
monkeypox.
It hurts, and I said, you know what? I don't even care. It's still been hurting me. I don't care. Hurt. Because my friend who is I know people who have had the monkeypox, and I also have friends of mine who are physicians, and one of them, she texted me earlier. She said, London, people are in so much pain. She was like, people in my office. She's like, they can't put their pants on. Like, so they're in so much pain. And once she
From the
from the
monkeypox?
monkeypox, she said
Oh.
they were in pain. She was describing some of her patients. She was like, they were in a lot of pain. And my friend as well, he called me the other day from an emergency room out of state. He's like, London, you're the only person I know to call. I can't even think of anybody else to call. I need you. So I instantly get on the phone. I start calling over to Department of Health in New York, and I knew someone who went to Morehouse who runs one of the offices, and I was trying to like reach out to ask about the treatment for him because he was at a facility, and I was trying to explain to him that the treatment is investigatory and that, you know, it's a 15-page, you know, write up to get it. You know, you have to write up. It takes like 2 hours. It's under IRB, so not every place has access to the treatment. I was like, what hospital are you at? And the doctor was trying to say, well, go to this other hospital. And I was just trying to calm him down, just to get him to relax. And then he finally relaxed and called me back and said, thank you so much. I needed that, you know, to calm down. But with that being said, it's like community has to be here for each other. You know, we have to support each other. And right now, because we have such a limited number of vaccines, our health department, we started this conversation back in May. I had this conversation with the health department. We started discussing stigma and communication. This is my second month in the office. We had already started talking about making sure that our messaging was not stigmatizing, making sure that our messaging was inclusive, and that we didn't other people, and that even if we did had to reach in and go to a target population, we didn't want to make anyone feel like this is a gay disease, you know, that anyone else can't have it. It was just the luck of the draw. So, you know, a person being infected is a part of a social community, and that's where it spread. It's not a gay disease. It's not a sexually transmitted disease. And we've seen this happen around HIV in the 90s, around AIDS and HIV. And I was alive during that period, and a lot of people don't seem to realize, they don't realize how old I am, but I was alive to know around the stigmatization around HIV and AIDS. And so I wanted to be intentional early on with the health department to make sure that didn't happen. So we were given, the way that it goes is that the federal government from the stockpile provides to the state health department, and the state health department then allocates to the local or the municipalities where it needs to go. And you know, our government, our health department has definitely been advocating for our citizens, but what we've decided to do is say, you know what, we're not just, while we wait and advocate, we still want to make sure that we provide services and support. And so my office, working with the health department, we've been trying to create a strategy and a action plan that provides service and support for people, particularly those who may need to quarantine and isolate. How do we answer that? You know, if someone is a sex worker, you know, if you look at the qualifications, you know, for people that were eligible for the vaccine, one of them said people that do transactional sex, right? So if someone's doing transactional sex, they're not able to do sex work while they're quarantined and isolating, right? Or while they're trying to heal. So we have to answer their needs, which will be housing and food. So we are working right now to make sure that we create a safety net and what that would look like. And so again, that goes back to the work group and me getting together with a work group to try to make sure that we touch all those points, because I can't, you know, me working with agencies works, but I really need those that are on the ground and in the community to kind of give me ideas so that we're proactive instead of reactive. What I did see yesterday is that the CDC was putting out guidance that they're potentially doing 1/5 of the amount in the vaccine. So 1/5 of the amount can be potentially as effective, and hopefully, after watching that yesterday on the news, hopefully that will be able to provide more from the stockpile for people. But so Baltimore last week we did on the 4th, we had a phone number and we had 60 vaccines that we were providing. So we provided 60 before then, but the week before, we did it at Chase Brexton. So our community outreach group went out to in areas that would for the target population, and made sure and signed people up. And so they were able to come in and Chase Brexton, and they were able to do the vaccinations. And so then we did that again. We were provided some extra doses, and we were able to provide doses last Thursday. You could call into the health department, which would be at the east or the west location at 9 a.m., starting at 9 a.m. And the calls, like when I first, because I wanted to make sure we were equitable with the vaccines, what has happened and what I've seen happen in New York, let's just say, like, if the vaccines are available in Harlem, which is a predominantly Black area, like a lot of those appointments, my friends went to Harlem to get the vaccines, and there were no Black people in Harlem getting the vaccines. And so there was questions around, like, how can we equitably distribute these vaccines to, make sure everyone gets access to them. That's been a constant question about how to do that. And so we've been strategically working with the health department to make sure that we are equitable with how the vaccines go out. Those who've had exposure, they get some. Those who are at risk, they get them, and make sure that also those that are healthcare workers have access to them. So our health department has been definitely, Dr. DeRaz, I want to commend her and the health department. They've been really advocating, and they're just trying to make everything work. And they're working with me to make sure that we do build that safety net.
So where do we get those vaccines now? And
we don't have any. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, seriously.
We don't at this time.
And where can I get the one that's not the 1/5? I wanted to get the 5/5, like the whole enchilada.
Yeah, so that's the thing. We are waiting.
I don't mean to be like really comedic with this, but on the real, like I want the full on dose.
And again, I get what the calls that the information I get from people is that feeling of complacency opposed to urgency. It's like, okay, LGBTQ it's in LGBTQ community, so let's be like complacent about it. But this is a disease that's already endemic in Africa, and it just so happened to affect LGBTQ community, and it can spread to other communities. So yes, there needs to be a sense of urgency, but definitely our municipality is working towards addressing that. But again, we need that our federal partner distributes them based off of their algorithm.
And let me chime in, because I'm glad you brought up the monkeypox issue, and as you were describing how the federal government has a role in disseminating this vaccine around the country. Kind of bringing it full circle. One thing I'll say was, when I was in law school, I went to University of Virginia Law School, so it was the law school where a lot of the conservative justices would come to teach. So I had I don't know how many classes and just one-on-ones with Clarence Thomas, or with William Rehnquist when he was Chief Justice, or John Roberts when he was on the circuit court, Anthony Scalia, So I would, and one thing I found often about these folks and their rhetoric, I think Clarence Thomas waited his whole life to write this Roe opinion, was this idea around choice, and that somehow people have choices, and you got to make the right choice, and if you make a bad choice, you're going to be punished for it. Bringing it back to this monkeypox issue, I saw tones of this in Thomas's concurring opinion in the recent Roe overturning decision, because to me it was like saying that you could tell he was waiting for so long to write this opinion, and it was such an attack on bodily autonomy, on sexual agency. I think that to look at it as just an abortion decision is very much off base. And if we're drawing the line in the sand at marriage and are concerned that like marriage is being attacked, I think we're missing the point. The way this relates to monkeypox is that I was just thinking, it's not inconceivable to me to think that in the future, if we get a right-wing president and we get a right-wing Congress, and there's already been this precedent where women's rights have been attacked, and basically all of our rights to bodily autonomy and sexual autonomy have been attacked, that with monkeypox, for example, maybe Congress passes a bill that says this will only be disseminated to non-LGBTQ communities, or if you want to get the monkeypox vaccine, you have to register as queer somehow, or putting restrictions on how these things.
Did you say register?
That's what I said. Register. Yes.
That's an interesting phrase. Like
it is
registering.
Yeah. I use that deliberately because as someone who was a German major and spent a lot of time in Berlin, I know that, Weimar Berlin was perhaps one of the most progressive places certainly in European history. And then, a decade, 2 decades later, you're in and I don't want to overstate it. But I do think that when we're talking about the recent Dobbs decision, when we're thinking about the overturning of Roe, we can't just look at it as an issue about abortion. It was an attack on your ability to engage in sexual activity, to be a fully embodied, queer person. And this notion that, well, if you're going to engage in sex, there's got to be some possibility of consequence with it.
Right.
And I could see tones of that potentially coming forward with new outbreaks, new epidemics in the future, if we don't put this back on track.
I think that's a good point, and I think you allude to something that a lot of people have talked around, especially in the mainstream media, and even within our own community, which is what are our responsibilities? What should we be doing? And the answer is, and I think the CDC did put out some new guidance last week alluding to this, is that we've got to be more careful right now, that the numbers are relatively low. I think Maryland has a couple hundred cases. Baltimore has, they're underreported, but
we are right next to DC, which
has 300. Yeah. So, but the concern is that, it's affecting gay, bi, and MSM right now. The concern is if it jumps right as kids are going back to school, right as colleges are going back, that this could very quickly get out of control. And I've talked to a state official, health official, who off the record is very alarmed, very concerned that we're going to lose control of this thing. But the conversation that I think that community, the gay, bi, MSM community, needs to have is what can we do to stop this, to squash it before it blows up? And one of the things is to refrain from group sex, from anonymous sexual partners for a couple of months. The latest guidance from the federal government is that by October, there's another, I forget, 750,000 doses or something that's coming. So there is more vaccine coming. As of today, there are 0 appointments in Baltimore available. So there just isn't enough vaccine right now. This is a vaccine preventable disease. We can squash it, but we need to.
Well, correction. We have vaccines, but the vaccines are for those that may have, like, what we have left are for those for exposure. So, of course, there are the ones for appointments, but there is vaccines for those who may become exposed. So if there's a known case of monkeypox and you're contacted by the health department, there's a 4-day space. And so, then you in turn will go to the health department, will call you, and then you would potentially be a person that would get a vaccine if you were exposed.
And I'm not trying to be funny. I'm a funny person to begin with, but I'm not. So are you saying that the answer is to not have sex or this and the other till October? I mean, that's what I heard.
But it's not just through sex. So the thing is that it could be in bedding, it could be in the bedding, it could be in towels. If we just saw a Black cis woman who posted, she works at the Quick Trip. Quick Trip in Atlanta, and all she does is handle money daily, right? And so she has monkeypox, and she didn't get it through sexual contact, and she didn't get it through, hanging with anyone. She just casually handle money, right? And so, it's scary when people just try to make it. I mean, I get, like, I understand, like, those are things that you definitely should do to prevent, not be shirtless at the club, try to cover up, your arms. If you are someone that does have monkeypox, the lesions, it's transferred through large respiratory droplets or through the lesions. So making sure that you're covering up, your full arms, that you're wearing a mask. Those are using hand sanitizer, making sure that you are, using, what is it? The Lysol, the spray, the other one with the M. Yeah, but it has the name, the one with the M with the blue bottle. the Lysol, like using those on like the doorknobs and making sure that, you're still disinfecting. I mean, we still were doing that, that mindset with COVID, right? Everyone's so like with the gloves and touching, it's like, keep doing the same, keep doing those things to protect yourself in the meantime, protect yourself.
And back to that your question, because I'm not saying don't have sex till October. I'm saying, and what the federal
Maybe you should be saying.
and I mean that's a personal decision, but what the federal guidance that came out last week was that they recommend avoiding group sex, anonymous sex, for now until we can get these vaccines out. And I don't think that's a heavy lift. And we are a sex positive publication, and we fought long and hard for the right to even have sex. So no one is saying don't have sex, but there are safer practices and less safe practices. And now is the time to err on the side of some caution until the federal government can catch up with the demand for this thing.
Can you all say some
Yeah.
for our people?
During COVID,
Can we talk about some safer practices?
Look, during COVID, there was a whole document. There was a document, a public health document that I read. It was like safe sex during COVID, right? And basically they were like copying some of the safe sex methods from like the 80s with HIV, but like they were like using like glory holes, but like showing you like what to do, like how to put like they were talking about all these things of like ways to protect yourself. Listen, we're in a Zoom era. You can get on virtual, you can look at somebody virtually and y'all can look at each other and, do whatever you need to do. We're adults. We can kind of use our minds and figure it out, but if, hey, sometimes being just a distance, it can just be, it's just as wonderful and enjoyable. You have a connection, a visual eye contact. We're making eye contact, because again, this is a public health emergency. We want to make sure that we are protecting other people, that we're protecting ourselves, making sure this isn't spreading and getting out of control, going to schools, and then kids are back out of school. You as a teacher and you're virtual learning again. Yeah. So we want to make sure that we're just protecting ourselves. I agree.
Anybody else, or should I go into a new direction? Okay. Good news. Yeah. Let's talk about where we think our community is going. What we can expect in the next 5 years. You see, I can be positive. I can. Let's talk about where we would like to see things go and maybe some solutions and a little bit of a direction into where we should go next.
So, I was actually talking about this before people started to arrive. Again, I'm a new teacher. I teach 6th and 7th grade. I was in 6th and 7th grade in 1996 and 1997, respectively, right? So I came up a certain way. What I am very happy about is that I find that my preteens, teens are much more open to same-sex relationships. Now, Mr. Chavis does not allow specific words in his classroom, and he will come down on you with the rain of all the circles of hell if you use them. And the kids learn this very early on. We don't say the R word. We don't say the F word. We don't say those things. So those things are still there, but I see kids, in my 7th grade class, we do a lot of SEL, right? So social emotional learning. That is not something that I received as a student in Baltimore County Public Schools. That is just not something that we talked about. I had no idea what SEL was. We have mandatory circles every single day. So I'm talking to my students about their feelings, and I think that's amazing. Some people think it's a waste of time. I don't, because I have a really good ear hustle and I get to learn everything that's going on in their lives. And I'm just like a nosy person by nature. So it's very exciting for me, right? I get to know what's going on with their interpersonal relationships. I get to know what's going on at home. That helps me figure out what I can and cannot say or do regarding like, disciplining or talking to my students. I'm a Cancer, so I'm very, yes. So I'm very like, I'm a person who is full of my own feelings, and I want everybody to feel safe and comfortable when they're in my room. And I'm just so excited to see like kids. I come out to my kids every year, right? So my 7th grade class is what I was talking about. We do like a timeline, and I kind of put dots up on the board, and they're high and low. And so I'll go up and I'm like, what do we think this is? And they're like, oh, well, that's a good thing. So I talk about the fact that I struggled with my own family when I was coming out. I talk about the fact that I was expelled from college for being gay, but then I end with the fact that I got to marry my best friend and my husband, and my parents were there, including my dad, right? And it's an amazing thing. And like, all the kids are crying, and I'm like, yes, I made kids cry. This is amazing. This is amazing. And it just feels good that like they're open to me telling them this, right? Because it's not something that I talk about. It's something that they obviously pick up on, right? I am in Baltimore City Public Schools. First of all, I'm a dude. They're not used to male teachers. I am not Black. They're not used to non-Black teachers. I have a more feminine energy than the dudes and the Black dudes that they've met. So they don't know what to do with me for like the first like 2.5 months. And it's a struggle. But once they get to know who I am and they can be themselves, it makes me happy that like I'm doing this job, because I know that at least my little cluster of 100 kids a year can maybe think about this, right? Like as they grow up, they can say, okay, well, I've experienced something different with this person. And so maybe it's not all bad. Maybe the stuff that like I hear, from my friends or from the neighborhood, like it's not all bad. This guy's kind of cool. I mean, he's annoying, but like he's cool. And that's kind of like what I hope to do every year, right? Is just kind of destigmatize and be there for them. And again, there's so many like same-sex relationships when it's almost like a fad now. I think it's because of Glee. I don't know. It's a very strange thing because I'm like, you clearly aren't even into each other, but like I keep that to myself, like whatever. She's like, oh, well, she's dating me, but she's like seeing him. And I'm like, well, you're probably straight. So, it's a very interesting world to be around preteens now, because it's just so different than my own experience when I was called faggot like almost all the time. And it sucked. And I'm just happy to see that in some small way, it's kind of like easing up for the kids these days.
So, Lee, how about you? I know that me personally, I feel like this generation has an advantage that I never had growing up, seeing same-sex relationships built into storylines and prominently. What is it like for you to look at pop culture now and to see this young generation who hasn't seen anything other than like a Black president or like two people? Like I remember when Ellen was like a big thing, and she got canceled when she essentially came out on that episode. That was like a huge thing. Or like Murphy Brown when she had this. Yeah, absolutely. Those were like big moments in life. And, if you're under like 25, you don't know what we're talking about. It's like a foreign language, but it's fine. But no, I mean, like, what are you seeing right now? And like, yeah.
Well, you had me until you mentioned pop culture. Aren't you the pop culture guy? Yeah.
That's me. I'll give you
I
the
am not
crown.
the pop culture guy. Let me be clear about that. But I think there is reason. Again, I'm optimistic about the future. I went to a very conservative boys' school in D.C. where nobody was out. This was in the 1980s, and that school now has a gay-straight alliance, which for me is just hope for the future. Now, I know the Trevor Project will talk about how something like 74% of students are harassed at school, even at schools, LGBTQ students are, even if there is a gay-straight alliance. So there is still work to be done. But I think I give a presentation about working with members of the LGBTQ community. And the interest in these presentations is remarkable. People from all sorts of backgrounds have questions they've always wanted to ask, especially about transgender people. And so we talk about pronoun. What is a transgender male? What terms are appropriate? What questions are appropriate to ask? This kind of thing. And the interest I'm seeing from people of all ages makes it clear that there's a willingness to be accepting and a desire to be accepting. Some people just aren't quite sure how to go about that. But I talk about generational differences in my presentation, and the younger generation has grown up in a period where there's much greater acceptance. They see images of themselves on television and in movies, which at one time wasn't even permissible. To, if you did see a gay person on the silver screen, it was probably a vampire or a sex worker or something like that. And now you can see very positive portrayals. I don't know if anyone's seen Heartstopper. Great.
It was
show.
so good.
Very positive.
Seriously, y'all should watch it.
You all should watch it. It is very positive. So I'm very encouraged just because of the acceptance that we've seen from the younger generation for what, I don't know, about 5 years, but certainly 10, 15, 20 years. I think, and also I can just say being a gay man who's now married and has a child, my husband and I go to children's birthday parties. We're on, we're on all the lists and feel complete acceptance. And, I don't know if anyone else had this experience. When we got married, we didn't get a single no to any invitation we sent out. And there were people who weren't even invited who were asking if they could come. So exactly. So the interest is so.
Where was my invitation? I know we didn't even know each other then, but where was my invitation?
I hear that all the time. No, so I'm very encouraged about what the future holds for the community.
Yeah, I want to say I think I'm a little neutral on it. I think with all issues there are pendulum swings. I think the pendulum is swinging in the wrong direction now. I think one of the weaknesses we have in the queer community now is that there's gotten to be a lot of complacency, a lot of fragmentation. And a lot of this kind of laissez-faire, Adam Smith, invisible hand thing, where people just sort of assume that, well, things have been good recently. We won these battles, so they're just going to continue being good, without the recognition that each and every one of these, hurdles that we've overcome for acceptance has had, very brave activists, literally, behind it, doing things, very outrageous things sometimes that were necessary, and just doing things. So if you don't have people doing things actively, they're not going to continue to get better. I would say also, when we talked about physical space, maybe this is just myself as a community organizer, but I think physical space is very important, and that we're not going to recreate and maintain queer community in this city or anywhere else in this country if we're trying to do it all virtually. So it is very important that we start going back to finding physical space, congregating, doing things like this, being together, because it takes activists and real work to keep the momentum going forward.
And Kevin in London, what do you think about this generation and the fact that they don't know anything other than having a Black woman being the vice president of the United States, or having same-sex relationships on television, or having a Black president, or things of that nature? Like, they have kind of taken it. Do they know what oppression is, or do they know what the you know what I mean?
Yeah. So truth is the reality of your own experience. I did today during my quick little interview I was telling about, they were like, give me a quote you remember. I was like, I remember when I was little, my mama never understood where I was coming from. And I would tell her, truth is the reality of my own experience. Because she would always tell me I could not be depressed. And so, it is, truth is the reality of your own experience. And so it's up to us to be intentional and always to remind them of upon the shoulders they stand. It's important for us to always remember the LGBTQ History Month, Black History Month, Pacific Islander Month, all those times, like all these special months, to actually embrace them. I'm a big around diversity, equity, and inclusion, making sure, I believe in solidarity across movements, embracing and bringing together all communities, right? And understanding, what the marginalized communities go through. But I also believe in amplifying voices. And so one of the campaigns I'm working on with my office is hashtag Be More Amplified, making sure that when we are trying to uplift the voices, that we center the voices that we're that we're talking about, that we're giving them the mic and letting them speak for themselves and to talk about their experiences and their unique experiences. I think that's really, really important because the youth have a lot to say. And a lot of times we kind of like, they don't understand and we stifle them like, oh, they don't know what's going on. But a lot of them are so much more aware of what we went through than we were, right? Like my nieces and nephews understood. So I'll just give you like a background. I used to be on a television show called Love Thy Sister, comes on WeTV. So I was one of the first like openly trans people on like a steady, constant show. And then after that, Caitlyn Jenner show came out. And I actually gave some suggestions because we were under the same production company. So I gave some suggestions to them to have that ladies' night, just a little piggyback. And so my nieces and nephews were watching the show with me. And at this time, my nieces and nephews never knew about me and about me being trans. I was on London and that's just it. And she and her and whatever. So the image pops up and it's me and it's like my best friends from school. And they show us, me at Morehouse and her at Spelman, and they show us together and I wasn't me, I was someone else. And my niece and nephew were like, oh, okay. Oh, okay.
That was it. Didn't have any more.
Yeah, like, oh, okay, on London. Oh, so that's what it used to be? Okay. Moving on. Never mention it again, never talk about it, never bring it up, no conversation. Like, it's nothing to talk about. When I got married to my husband, it's like, it's not a thing. And that's one of the things I'm kind of happy about is that youth today have the space to kind of explore and see these things in this ideal world. Like the world that I imagined ideally was having a Black president, and it was me being able to be married, which I was able to be married. I have a husband, but separated. But imagining a world where that could happen, and imagining a world where the person that I envisioned myself and always identified myself to be, that I was able to be that person. And like ideally I wanted to be in that world, and they are living in that ideal world. And so in a way, it's like I kind of don't want to take away from that special fantasy place of mine, but I also don't want them to forget. It's like Sankofa reaching backward to move forward, and you forget from whence you came. You can't go anywhere else. And so I always remind my nieces and nephews, like I'll tell them, this is what I had to go through, this is what I did it in today's world. Like a lot of trans women have access to some healthcare that I didn't. Like, things that I wanted to do, I had to pay for out of pocket. Every surgery, everything I wanted to do, I had to pay for because I didn't have access to some of the inclusions that exist now, that I'm so thankful to those whose shoulders I stand, that went out and fought for me and had rocks thrown at them for me. I stand in my privilege a lot of times. Like I understand around, like you said, respectability politics. I stand in my palatability and being able to go into a space and be comfortable for some people, but I love to go into a room and disrupt it. Like I love to sit at a dinner table and disrupt the table and say, hey, you know what, by the way, I'm this and that. And, and I also like to change up the menu so that I can bring others in to get a seat at that table that's reflective of what they really want to eat, the information they want to take on. And so we have to be intentional with that.
So I look at it through a political DC kind of perspective and lens. And I think Kelly hit on it with the complacency thing, because two things can be true at once. This younger generation, and I speak to young people a lot, and what I tell them is, they're so saturated in social media and so overwhelmed with information, and they can access anything at any time. But what I tell them is to read about the community, because it's not only is it not taught in schools, our history, the LGBTQ history, but now they're actively banning even mentioning it in classrooms. So they're not ever going to find out about it unless they, take some initiative and read about it. And the disconnect for me is that there is all this openness and acceptance now, and you can turn on any TV show, you can watch any form of media, and there's queer inclusion, and that's great. And the disconnect for me is we got to get these young people voting. They just don't, when, back to the complacency thing, and I rail against this all the time. In 2016, when everybody assumed that Hillary was going to win. And I can't tell you how many people said to me, well, is the Blade going to shut down when Hillary wins? Why do we need the gay press? Why do we need gay bars? We've got everything. We won everything. It's done. And Hillary will, just cement it because Obama, gave us everything. And I said, I would say to them, well, that sounds good, but let's see how this plays out. And of course, we know how it played out. And Donald Trump made 3 picks to the Supreme Court. And these are young picks. And only about 60% of the electorate turned out in 2016. So 40% didn't show up, even though we all knew that on day one, whoever won was going to have a Supreme Court pick waiting for them. Yep. And still, that wasn't enough to get people to show up. And as much as I hate to oversimplify everything down to voting, it is like the basis of our democracy. Like, you have to vote, and the Republicans are making it as hard as possible for Black people to vote, and for poor people to vote, and for young people to vote. And so we have to figure out a way. We have to be engaged. We are back on defense, and we have to figure out a way to engage these younger generations and get them in the game. We need them protesting. We need them voting. We need them organizing, because some of us are gay and old and tired. And for me, what is the most demoralizing thing? I cannot imagine fighting for abortion rights again, fighting for gay marriage again. Like, been there, done that. Why are we really going backwards and relitigating all of these things that were already settled law according to 3 nominees to the court who apparently all lied under oath? But so that's my disconnect. We have this incredible tool of social media that exposes these generations to so much content. Much of it is bad, but some of it is very good. But it hasn't sort of converted into, getting these younger folks engaged in civics and in voting, and so that's what I would like to see, is how do we bridge that gap.
For the record, Kevin was not talking about me when he said gay and old. He was not saying that. He was not looking in my direction. That's okay. Go ahead, London.
And we have to give them something to vote for. I think that's really important. We have to give people something to vote for. It's been the same. It's the same old people, same people doing the same old things. It's like my dad was telling me this earlier. We were talking about, in some of these same city council districts or, state representative districts. And actually, let's mention that too. You got to vote locally too. Like, you can't just vote because this is where we see what happens. Like, you feel like what's going on when you vote locally, right? Like, you have to vote in your local elections. It's extremely important, but you have to give them local candidates that actually are going to actually do the things that they're saying and all these. And a lot of people are fed up that they feel like, people are making all these promises and they see nothing when they get into office, and it's really important that we're putting in the right candidate. We're educating people on who the right candidate is. It's like this constant thing, like everyone kept saying to vote, but people were not really telling people what they would lose if they didn't vote. Like, some people just didn't know, like, we would lose this or we would lose that. Like, that's really important to educate the voter on the candidate, on the issues, and also to give them candidates that really reflect them, right? So you have organizations like the Victory Fund that support LGBTQ candidates and stuff, that are there to uplift them. Let's go ahead and get behind each other. Why not, as a community, don't we, learn to be a backer and really push for the candidate that we believe in, right, as a community, and stand behind them instead of like breaking off into all these different silos, but really standing together behind one, like a candidate that we know is going to make something happen.
I just want to talk about one quick statistic. Sorry. The Victory Fund, I interviewed them for my story about a non-binary candidate, T. Hopkins. Yep, absolutely. You were in that story. Mm-hmm. And it appears that Tia Hopkins will be elected to or named to the Democratic Central Committee. But not just Tia Hopkins, there is a non-binary candidate in this state who will also advance to the DCC. So Maryland has made history by electing 2 non-binary candidates to the Democratic Central Committee. There were only, as of last year, there were only 11 non-binary elected officials in the nation. So there's some progress there. Yeah. Okay, Kelly.
Well, I'm glad you made. I was actually going to bring up the Victory Fund. That was going to be my comment to what you were saying, Kevin. I just rolled off a term serving on the board of the Victory Fund on the, they've got different, I think ours was the Mid-Atlantic Campaign Committee. So we would endorse candidates from Mid-Atlantic states. And one thing I would say being on that board and other sort of political organizations for LGBTQ issues is that I think a lot of those organizations have lost the ability to really connect to voters. They've often lost the ability to know what's going on the ground in different jurisdictions. So, and I noticed this really on the board of the Victory Fund. It was a very standard, primarily gay candidate that they would be backing. An inability to find people who were exciting, and again with this kind of notion of respectability politics, I think sometimes these organizations get very much into trying to fit into a very certain mold of what they think like the Democratic establishment in DC is going to favor. People who I knew would win votes and win some of these tight races in some states where we really need to pick up seats were often pushed to the wayside in favor of folks who seem more conventional and standard. And frankly, the Victory Fund has a bad record of not really winning a lot of the races that they get behind. And I've seen this throughout organizations. So I think that there's got to be a change, not just with the general population, but also how we're structuring these political entities that are supposed to be advocating for our interests.
Now I think it's time to turn it over to you. Do you all have any questions for our panelists today? Please let me live out my Oprah fantasies of coming out into the audience and, giving you the microphone. And I mean, I'll just come up to you and just hand you the microphone. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes.
I've known John for a long time, and so he knows I'm a pretty sunny and optimistic person, and this has been very informative and important, but also pretty heavy. And I'm wondering how each of you, if you have any techniques or tactics to feel more buoyant about life than you otherwise might. As a woman and a gay woman, it sometimes feels like I'm just being attacked, by people who just wish that I didn't exist or wanted me to just be pregnant at home all the time without being able to do any of the things that I want to do. And I most of the time can bounce myself back. But I'm wondering if there's any things that you all do to just kind of feel better about the world.
Don't all jump on that answer.
Being not just a gay man, but a gay lawyer, I'm probably the worst person to answer that question on some level. But and I'm fortunate to have a 6-year-old in my house. And so to him, life is just joyful and exciting and wonderful. And to me, that's just been a real saving grace. All through the pandemic, he wasn't even aware it was happening. His life was just great. Let's go for a bike ride. There was so much fresh air and exercise. It nearly killed me. But for me, limiting social media has been one of the most helpful things, and it takes a lot of discipline. It's so easy to pick up the phone and just start scrolling. But going on a news fast or a social media fast, just putting the phone in the drawer and not looking at it, to me has really helped my mood better than anything else. And I'll just leave it. There are other things I do, like I love music, and there's music from my younger years that I've been rediscovering, and it's been a real joy. So instead of listening to the news in the car, I've been listening to that. That's been really helpful too. But whatever works for you. If you want to borrow a 6-year-old, I'd be glad to drop him off for the weekend. And
Jen has 4 kids, so I think she's good.
Oh my goodness. Okay, there you go. How old are your kids?
10, 12, and 8. We have a blended family.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, I
Okay.
love that.
Well, I'm sure they bring you a lot of joy. So that's a good place to start.
Wow. It's so funny you just mentioned that. That's one of the things that I do. I go back to music from my childhood and like old music I saved in like my Apple iCloud when I was like in college or like high school. Like those songs would take me back to a place where I was of innocence and I could just imagine myself there, right? And I would just go into my own space and like smells. So I love candles, like oud, the smell of ouds. Like when I was in Dubai and when I go to the Middle East, the smell of oud and rose. I have one. I have one oud and rose today. I love the smell of ouds and rose, and like I love that music. But one of the other things that I love to, or I've learned to do, is to create boundaries. And my therapist had taught me this around boundaries are the line between where you love yourself and where you love others, and or how you love yourself and how you love others. And a lot of times for me, and even in this position and in my normal daily, I'm always the person that people rely on. And so people, like I've been in my therapist's office and the phone is ringing back to back and he's like, turn your phone off. He's like, are you serious? Like if people will be calling me and asking me for things, like needing, but no one ever is there to like give me back. Like I'm always a giver, but I never get back. And so my therapist taught me that I need to learn to put up boundaries, and that has really helped me a lot, to be able to get the time to be able to do that thing, to sit down in my space. I have chosen children as well, and they are also they're teens, and so that for me has also been another thing that kind of keeps me going, because they just see the world as just everything is just okay. Like we'll make it through. Like they'll give me the energy to like go forward and like to push through when times when I can't. And also my animals, right? I have 2 dogs, I have 2 cats. One of my cats just had 4 kittens. So the times when I'm in the
That's
bed.
6 animals.
Yes, huh?
That's 6 animals.
Yeah, no.
Child, I don't even have a plan.
No. So when the dogs, but when I feel like I'm just can't get up and I'm down, I'm really remembering Fox has to eat and Teddy has to eat and they need to go outside. And like it pushes me to get up in the times when I really just can't get up and do anything. So yeah, finding that love in animals or in children is always a good thing.
For me, one of the biggest things that kept, and you might not agree with this because you have little babies that you have to cook for, but one of my absolute favorite things to do is cook. Like I love to just be extra and find the most ridiculous recipe because it's just the 2 of us, right? We don't have 19 animals or children. It's
But
us.
you have a gay journalist who you could cook for, and I've
This
never
is
gotten
true.
an
This is
invitation
true.
yet.
Well, we
This is
don't-
pathetic.
Guys, again, 1 bedroom. I don't even have a dining room table. We eat on our coffee table.
I
but
can take
we-
a to-go plate,
got
and
you.
there's
We got
foil.
you.
There,
But I mean, really, it's finding something that just makes you happy and doing it to the most ridiculous degree, right? Another thing that I did, because I'm a career changer, I was in marketing, like I said, guys, I got a bachelor's degree during COVID, right? I went back to school at my alma mater, which was just University of Baltimore right up the street. And I realized my thing that kept me really busy, I love to learn. And so learning something that isn't happening right now, AKA history, was really, I think, when I look back, saved me, because not only did it just kind of broaden my horizons, but I was learning stuff that meant something now, but happened a long time ago, and being able to connect those dots. That was my thing. But I went to school and I need in Baltimore City, if anybody's interested, you can teach with a conditional certificate with 30 credits in a specific, if you want to teach ELA, get 30 credits in English. For me, it was history. Because I graduated from there, I only needed 33 credits to get a whole new degree. So that kept me very busy. I took 15 credits and 18 credits. I was done. I was student teacher. I was long-term subbing at Baltimore Design School right up the street and on Zoom. And it just, the kids, for me, it's the kids. Everybody's saying the kids. The kids give me joy. They give me hope. They are rambunctious and they've got a lot going on. But again, I'm nosy, so I'm into it. And I'm very happy with what I chose to do during that. And now I'm getting to kind of reap in a positive way what I sowed that during that crazy year. And that's just me. Cooking and kids. That's me. And that's probably you too, but it's different.
Were there any other questions? Yeah, absolutely.
Hello. So I've recently gotten involved with doing an all-anon program, and I think what I desire right now is to do that with the queer community. But right now, I can't find one that exists with the queer community specifically in Baltimore with all-anon, and I'm wondering, how do I create something from scratch with something like that, where I desire to be with queer people, do something like that. But I don't know what resources to use to create that.
Sure, I can take a stab at it. I think we obviously have the Pride Center, and there are organizations around that, a lot of which are located sort of in our neighborhood, Old Goucher, Station North, in that vicinity. How long have you been in Baltimore?
2 years.
Okay. I think it's yeah, I mean, it's been a tough 2 years to really meet people. So perhaps London would have some resources, but I think going to the Pride Center, going out to the organizations that we have in the city is a good place to start, meet people, and maybe even going to some of the the current Al-Anon groups that are. I know we've got some on Maryland Avenue and on Charles Street, and I have seen a number of queer people coming in and out of those meetings, even though they weren't necessarily, I don't think, queer-oriented meetings. Yeah.
And there's also like online community that you can start. Like a lot of queer community here live online, and they find support online in spaces. Some people have social, they just are afraid to come out, and so they live online in online spaces, and they create. Our community loves to make a spreadsheet and a Google Docs. Listen, they will make all types of Google Docs and spreadsheets and just work together. So definitely online community. I don't have any of my cards, but definitely I can give you my information and I can look up some things for you too.
Anybody else have questions? Yep.
More of just a compliment and comment. Thank you guys very much for coming out today. I'm an elementary school educator. So for what you were saying about definitely coming out and vote, there's a lot of policies. I mean, when you look at the Florida Don't Say Gay bill and how they're really trying to undermine a lot of what's going on in school under the different guises, I definitely think that coming out and vote, is definitely important, especially with a lot of the elections that we have coming up. So thank you guys for speaking to that. Very appreciative of that.
That was very nice. I know, seriously. Any other questions?
Are there any online questions?
Steve, do we have any online questions? Y'all were so thorough that they were like, Oh yeah, absolutely. Annalise.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm thinking about my role here at Center Stage and thinking about the various work that y'all do. And I'm thinking about a through line, which is storytelling, whether it's organizing or teaching or law or even public policy, right? Like in some form, what we're all doing is storytelling. And I'm wondering if you can speak to there's this, I'm looking at this big Baltimore Center Stage 60-year anniversary. So we're using this season. Part of my mandate is to think about 60 years into the future. What do we want Baltimore Center Stage and Baltimore City to be? And I'm wondering if any of y'all could speak to the role of storytelling in your work or as part of the sort of how do we make Baltimore City a safer place, a better place for the LGBTQ community?
Well, let me just say that because I think one thing I have seen in the time that I've lived in Baltimore, in the 10 years I've been here, is some people call it a lack of vision, but I kind of call it a lack of a story for Baltimore and for a lot of the communities in Baltimore. I think Baltimore in a lot of ways is adrift right now because there's not a story that we're telling us about where we're supposed to go, what we're supposed to be doing. So yes, we need excellent storytellers, not just for the queer community, but for the whole city.
And I feel different. As a Baltimore native, I know there's a major story here. A lot of people have never had the space to really tell the story. A lot of people have not felt comfortable enough to tell the story. And as we were speaking in the back earlier, talking about utilizing spaces, and I discussed, a part of me as teen, center stage was a big part of me coming out and being who I was, because I came here as a part of the Young Thespian Society, and we came and we would review plays early and put them out, and it was about it. We would tell stories, we hear stories. It helps us to be comfortable enough to put our own stories in when we were trying to help to give criticism on everything. Back when I was younger, Baltimore we called Baltimore the city that reads. It was on all the bus stops. It said Baltimore City that reads under Mayor Kirk Schmoke. And one of the things that was big for me was the Enoch Pratt Library. And when I was younger, my godmother, Diane Owens, she used to take me to, whenever I did well in school, which was often, she would take me to Louise's Cafe, and Louise's Cafe was a bookstore. And it was in Mount Vernon, and it was a bookstore and it was a cafe in one place. And so you would go in there, you could read the books, right? And they served soup in bagel-shaped bowls. And then we would leave there and we would go over to the koi pond at Enoch Pratt Library, and there would be story time, and you could sit down and do story time and also kind of tell stories. I think that that's a really good idea to do. I think we need to go back to that so Baltimore can have a story, because this place has a lot of history. Baltimore has a lot of history. We've produced a lot of first Black billionaires. We've produced a lot here, okay? And so I think that giving us that space like this to tell those stories, just like they have the Baltimore Connects, Baltimore Connects had you could come and do individual stories and they curate. I think that would be a great idea to work together.
Kevin, what can we expect from the Blade coming up in the coming months?
Well, speaking of storytelling, thank you. Well, in the immediate short term, we're obviously all over the monkeypox story and trying to communicate all the latest developments there. The midterms loom, and there are a lot of ramifications there for our issues. So we're covering all of that. More broadly, I would say, in sort of an answer to your question about storytelling, one thing I have noticed, especially when we have applications for interns, or if we have a fellowship program that we run out of our nonprofit foundation, I would say 75% of the applicants for those programs are trans youth of color. And so when you talk about storytelling, we try to talk about it telling different stories, telling inclusive stories. So, as a niche publication, we've always told stories that are outside the mainstream. But now I think this younger generation of storytellers, of young aspiring journalists, the stories are getting a lot more diverse, and the places where they can tell their stories are much more inclusive than they ever were before. Part of that is due to social media. Part of it, through social media, we are able to advertise these positions to a much broader audience than ever before. So we're attracting, candidates that maybe never picked up the Blade before. So I think that's really exciting. And the other thing that's very different in terms of our focus is that we have a big international reporting program. We have media partners all over the Caribbean, Latin America. We've recently expanded into Africa and to Eastern Europe. So, again, leveraging the power of social media to connect with voices and communities that we would have never been able to interact with before, and enlist them in our mission of telling the stories of the LGBTQ community. I see that as something that will continue to grow.
And we'll go down the line. So what's next for everyone? London, go ahead.
I had to be the first.
Other than you finding us those monkeypox vaccines.
Yes, I was saying, I'm going to be finding monkeypox vaccine. Well, that's really big for me right now. It's about me actually helping to build a strategic plan for my office and one that was already in place and putting that together, making sure that it is something that is actionable, that it can be evaluated, and something that is inclusive and equitable. That's really big for me right now. And it's big for me at this point to also bring in those voices that are not heard, bring them into the commission and to create the commission and to also create our work group to help guide the work that we do, to make sure that the things that we do are actionable, that you see them. Like I am big on that. Like I want to actually see like the things that we do, I want you to be able to feel them. Like I wanted to bring emotion to you. And so like I'm actually trying to create a campaign right now with youth, and it's a visual campaign kind of like to evoke emotion online, but it's one of the things to get people involved and be more amplified. But yeah, I want to feel the difference here.
Lee.
I wonder if I could answer the previous question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
So I just wanted to say, I think Center Stage is a wonderful fixture in Baltimore. My husband and I have been coming here for many years. We usually are seasoned subscribers, and I'm glad that it's part of Baltimore's story. With estate planning, sometimes I talk about estate planning as writing your own epilogue. So we all have our life story, and with a will, when your life ends, you can dictate what happens after you're gone. And so the epilogue is what happens, when the story is over. We talked about, I don't want to talk about, SHOP, but we talked about powers of attorney and advance directives. Those can help you prepare for the unexpected as you go down, as you go through your life. I think as members of the queer community, we've talked tonight about how there are ways that we can try to influence the narrative. I don't know if we can turn the narrative on its head or change it, but we can influence the narrative, and that we should do that and make this our story and work toward an ending that we all think is the outcome that this community should see. So that's so storytelling is part of what I do, and I think it's part of what the queer community needs to do as well. And I'm glad to see the Center Stage being part of that. And thank you again for hosting this tonight. I'll end on that note.
But Lee, what
What's
should
next
people
for-
be doing next?
You're not going to let that one go.
I'm not going to let that go. No.
What's the question? What's next for me, or what should the community be doing?
I think
next?
both. I mean,
I think I answered that question.
Oh,
Doing what we can to influence the
okay. You
narrative.
can pass the microphone.
Okay.
I've been told to shut up.
I've
Okay.
got my own
You've
thing.
got your
Thank
own.
you. No, it's fine. For me, it's just the kids, right? It's I'm a history teacher. I tell stories all the time. I'm on the stage.
Wait.
What?
I'm going to get my Diane Sawyer on
Why-
right
why
now.
does he
Aren't
keep
you
doing
going to be
this to
going
me?
to aren't you traveling someplace for, yeah, please.
Yeah,
tell
well,
us
that's
about
not queer related, but
it. You're
yes,
queer and
this is
it's
true.
related to
I mean, okay, fair, guys, fair. So I am actually getting to go on a trip. So I'm getting my Master's of Arts in Teaching right now at Morgan State University, and we are going to Europe for 10 days. And I'm going to study the Black experience in cities like London, Paris, and Amsterdam, with really, really cool, like I'm going to get to go to the underground club in Paris where jazz was brought to Paris. Like I'm getting some really cool hands-on experiences. Again, social studies teacher, I don't want to teach my kids about the same boring white dudes from those countries and those cities. So anything that I can bring to get them excited about history, because something that maybe you don't know in Baltimore City, kids don't get social studies until middle school, because we can have a whole conversation about this, but it is said that because they can't read on grade level, they don't deserve social studies. So I have 14-year-old seventh graders who don't know north, south, east, west. They don't know the 7 continents. They don't know the 5 oceans. They know nothing. They know nothing. And it is not their fault. And it breaks my heart. Again, I am new in this, so my zeal is all the way up here. I'm very excited. I hope that I can keep that up because it was a really crazy. So last year was my first official year as a teacher in Baltimore City. I did do, like I said, a long sub position. That's not the same. I am really understanding what the school system is and what my kids need and what they're not getting. So anything that I can do to make my kids understand, they don't even know what social studies is, guys. They get mad at me because they have to take this class because all of a sudden they are in middle school and the city requires it of them. And they take it out and why do I even need this? So it's a very interesting position, but I feel as though I did well, and I'm excited to keep doing better and better. And so the more that I can make them understand how important their history is, right, and how important history is in general, the more I can get them to understand civics and voting and why it's necessary, the better I will feel. I know that's selfish, but it is what it is. We're in our jobs for a reason, and that's what I'll continue to do. So that's me.
And Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to keep, our community work. We're building Old Goucher incrementally, step by step. It's not a huge, we've got some really amazing projects coming down the pike, but I'm really into just creating spaces for Black entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of color, women entrepreneurs, and we've got a number of small businesses. You should check out our neighborhood. If you haven't been, we're around 23rd Street, 24th Street, Maryland Avenue, Charles Street, right in the center of the city. So a lot of good stuff going on.
So the other, maybe 3 weeks ago, I had an event with Goldman Sachs Small Business 10,000 and Bloomberg Philanthropy, and we hosted LGBTQ businesses with the city. We talked about the procurement process. We also discussed Amiri's Law, which is still in committee. And we discussed those things, and we try to network everyone together. So I would love to try to build that out. And to everyone that came, they loved it, and they wanted to see more, LGBTQ businesses and women businesses coming together in like a happy hour kind of networking thing. So
I would encourage everyone to keep on reading the Baltimore Banner and the Washington Blade and look for more activities and panels like this. We want to continually engage with the community and fill a void where we have definitely seen one here in Baltimore. And we have some free water bottles, sunglasses, all of it's branded. And I think beer koozies, is that what I say over there? Yeah. All that. So please, we don't want to take it back with us. Please take it with you and continue to read our work, and we will continue to try and better serve the community. Thank you all so very much. Thank you. Yeah. All right. I guess that means we have to stand up. No, we can. Really? You can fit all of us? Okay. You must have an iPhone 13.